One of the most important parts of grading in Dolby Vision is making sure you have the right hardware and software. The only way you can have complete confidence in the product you're delivering is to make sure your grading suite meets the requirements for Dolby Vision mastering and is configured correctly.
So in this video, you'll learn about all the hardware and software you need to do Dolby Vision grading. The first component of a Dolby Vision capable grading suite is the HDR mastering monitor. Now, Dolby does not set minimum requirements for monitors to use for HDR grading. You have the freedom to use whichever HDR monitor you choose. However, Dolby does have performance requirements if you want to be a Dolby certified facility. In that scenario, your monitor must meet or exceed these specs. First, a minimum peak luminance of 1000 nits on an L32 loading pattern. Next, a minimum contrast ratio of 200,000 to 1, and support for 100% of the P3 color gamut. You'll also need support for Rec 2020 and the SMPTE ST2084 EOTF. For this training, we're using a Flanders Scientific XM310K. Other monitors available at this time include the Sony BVMX300, Flanders XM311K, the Canon DP V2420, as well as offerings from ISO and others.
While mastering in Dolby Vision, you'll view your HDR grade on an HDR monitor, but you'll also want an SDR mastering monitor in your setup as well. This allows you to view HDR and SDR images simultaneously. Now, this isn't a requirement for grading and delivering Dolby Vision, but it's very helpful. And there are tons of options on the market for SDR reference monitors, and most facilities already have one that's probably suitable.
There are some concerns you need to consider when choosing both your HDR and SDR monitors. First, you need to decide what monitor suits your needs for the projects you'll be working on. Different monitors support different peak brightness levels. And if you know you need to hit a certain brightness for a project, you should choose a monitor that has that capability. When viewing both HDR and SDR images simultaneously, it's a good idea to use similar monitor technology for each monitor. When possible, the same make and model is best. One set up for HDR mastering and the other set up for Rec 709.
Now, once you've chosen your monitors, you need to make sure they're configured correctly. All monitoring in Dolby Vision should be set up for full range levels. Your HDR monitor should be configured for full range, but also set to use the SMPTE ST2084 EOTF. Depending on what your project requires, you will either configure the monitor's color space to P3D65 or Rec 2020. Now, your SDR monitor will likely not be configured for full range input by default. You'll need to go into the menus and enable that option. The SDR monitor should be set to use the Rec 709 color space and a gamma of BT1886 or gamma 2.4. Of course, monitor menu settings will vary, so check with your monitor's documentation for more info.
You'll also need a color grading system that supports Dolby Vision. Many systems have support for Dolby Vision, including DaVinci Resolve and Filmlight's Baselight. For a complete list, visit the Dolby Vision section on the Dolby website. Finally, you need a Dolby CMU. CMU stands for Content Mapping Unit. The CMU emulates Dolby Vision processing in a playback device, allowing you to view tone-mapped outputs of your grades based on the Dolby Vision metadata. The CMU is essential to Dolby Vision grading. It allows you to both monitor your HDR and your SDR simultaneously. It also lets you view individual HDR target trims at various peak brightness levels, if you choose to add those trims. The CMU can be either internal or external. An internal CMU is integrated into your color grading system, and an external CMU is a dedicated hardware box. You may also hear these referenced as the iCMU for internal and eCMU for external. The capabilities are almost identical between the internal and external CMUs. The internal CMU is a cost-free option that works great for most facilities and workflows. In this series, we'll be utilizing both the internal CMU in DaVinci Resolve and an external CMU.
So having your grading suite correctly configured for Dolby Vision guarantees the creative intent of your content is maintained across every platform and display it's viewed on. And if you follow Dolby's guidelines for hardware and software configuration, you can be confident in the accuracy of your final outputs. All right, coming up in the next video, we'll dive into grading software and how to configure your project for Dolby Vision grading.